If all those is a yes, then you move to 5 policy areas: monetary policy, fiscal policy, prudential policy, and financial sector policy, and capital control. Capital control is the last one. And there's a lot of combinations to use 1, 2, 3, or many instruments together to dealing with particular instruments. So it is absolutely very technical, very complicated the issue as well. It's not easy, but that's the way it is. I think I don't have very much time left. I should save some time for the open discussions. So I probably will stop here. If I can group them together, I will re-emphasize, number one, the world is changing. The world is really not the world we can imagine as the world we thought before. And the capital flow become ever stronger, ever bigger, ever volatile, and become one issue everyone have to dealing with. And there are a lot of policy tools to dealing with capital flows, but it's a very high technical, very complicated issues. We got to be very careful when we use the instruments. So this is the very a basic few things I would like to report to you, part of our study for the whole area. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Zhu, for an insightful and inspiring lecture. Please remain on stage. A question and answer session will commence shortly. May I invite Professor Tao Zhigang, Associate Dean in Knowledge Exchange and China Development of the Faculty of Business and Economics, to come to the stage and moderate the Q&A session.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zhu, for giving us a really wonderful lecture. I think you have enough materials. You can actually spend 3 hours on that. And
I guess you should hire me as a professor here.
we should do that.
You should extend the tenure for me. Yes. So I can give a 3-day lecture on this issue.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I think it would be a great honor for us. Now it's question and answer session, and I like to open to the floor. Yes, Richard.
Imbalance between where financial assets are located and the size of the economies where financial assets are scarce. Growth prospects are better in emerging markets. Now, for the IMF to play an important role in all this, how can it respond effectively to the interests not only of the advanced economies but also of the emerging markets, especially since the policy instruments that you alluded to are very technical, diverse. They probably are designed very much with an advanced economy background, but do they fit the political economy of such diverse emerging markets? I would like to have your thoughts.
Well, thank you. It's a good question. Obviously, it's a tough question. It looks like I will not get tenure from the university because you want me to go back to the International Monetary Fund, right? And to continue my job there. You're right. It's become ever clear, I think, for us, because the world is changing, the money is moving away from the advanced economy to the emerging market in huge size and very volatile, which in a certain way may have a big impact on the global stability issues, and which is our job to maintain global financial and economic stabilities. So that's the reason we pay attention on these issues. So the slides I show you actually demonstrate that we have done a lot of studies on these issues. And we try to understand what is the process, what the reason, what the drive force. And we try to figure out what's the policy to dealing with this in a proper way. So this is actually one sort of things we show our members. Then we try to working with all the members just to disseminate this information so that all the people understand the situations, then working together to see how do we come to the proper measures to dealing with these issues. I think that's number one. So we are working very hard to promote those ideas, those thoughts, and those instruments, and also working with the governments and authorities and see whether can work together to use these instruments to maintain the global financial stability. You have another important issue, because as the money comes from the advanced economy moving into the emerging market, currently more policies on the recipient side, but how do we dealing with the export side, the source side? Yeah, we're working on that. And because it's obviously the key issue is, in the advanced economy, your macro policy, if in a certain way have a negative impact on the emerging market, you should take that into the consideration of your policy design. That's the whole idea. So now we are working in these areas and to see how we do the global cooperation, not only from recipient side, but also from the source side, from the export side. We have a few things, actually. You picked the right place because I skipped their slides. And, but this is a very important issue. Yeah, absolutely, I agree with you. Yeah. I see the ladies there.
Lady? Yeah, so lady first.
You should give lady first, yeah. Chen Gang should wait for a while. Professor always give the chance to students, are you?
Hello, Dr. Zhu. I'm Mona. Thanks for your fascinating talk. Your colleague...
You do think it's fascinating?
Yeah.
Seriously?
This is Hong Kong U student, you know.
You don't think it's boring?
I think it's interesting, actually.
Oh, you tone down from fascinating to interesting. If I further ask you, you will say, well, I think it's okay.
No, so stop here. Your colleague, Christine Lagarde...
My boss.
Yeah, your colleague. At a forum in Beijing last Sunday, she said the unstable and gloomy global economic environment urges China to make change to its economic growth model. So my question is, do you see the changing economic growth model will help to guide the capital flow into China? And if you were asked by the Chinese government to make a to-do list for changing the economic model, what would we see on the list and the order of the tasks?
Now I see the quality of the Hong Kong U students. This is a topic for the dissertation of a PhD in economics. No, this is absolutely amazing. You pull two things together. You pull the growth model change in China and see how this growth model change properly got a capital flow. Yeah, this is absolutely, you have a lot of imagination. I think that's fascinating. Yeah. And I don't know whether you're undergrads or you're PhD or you're MA. You should write a dissertation on these issues. And at least this is a new area. I can tell you it's a new area, not very much study on these issues yet, because the whole capital management is a new area. So you probably want to, you look so young, you maybe it's undergrads, grads, I don't know. But anyways, it's very, very fascinating. I emphasize fascinating and topical. It's not only interest. Good issue. The first issue, China have to change its growth model, because before the crisis, Chinese growth model very much is export driven. And during the crisis, moved to more investment driven. And the real issue is China have to move into domestic consumption-driven growth model. And China working very hard, move into that direction. I think we have to say that. Because in the past few years, it's not easy to say, hey, you consume more, you come to Hong Kong to shopping, right? It's not that easy. You need to do a lot of things. For example, you need to build a social safety nets, you need to build a healthcare education systems, so people feel much more safer. So they will save less, they will consume more. For example, you have to make sure the property prices are lower, so people would not spend 100% of their money into the housing, but they have money spent on other areas. So it is not a simple issue, but what we observe in the past few years, the government's really working on those issues, try to encourage people to consume more. So this is in the good direction. I think that's one thing. Now, how do we link with this capital flow? China is still the largest capital recipient. Of course, in the emerging market, sometimes number one, sometimes number two in the whole world. Last year, China's number one in the whole world. Sometimes US is number 1, China is number 2, sometimes UK. But China is always top 3 in the capital recipient, most of them in the FDI, and now gradual increase in the portfolio investments. Where does FDI goes? Most FDI goes to manufacturing, which is good because it helps the China's manufacturing up the value chain to the top, which is very good. But if you want to change the growth model, you want to move its capital into the service sector, for example. Because into the service sector, you create more job, you let the people easy to earn more money, so people will consume more. So then you need a policy to change the service sector openness policy as well. So I would say there is a linkage between the growth model change and manage the capital flow. And particularly, for example, I'll just give you one example in the service areas. There's a lot of things can be done and make the capital flow more friendly, useful for a more balanced Chinese growth. Yeah. But thank you very much. It's absolutely a wonderful question. And you do have to write a dissertation on that. Now we come to Professor Chen Gang. Chen Gang is very shy. He dared not to ask a question now.
Chen Gang, yeah.
You mentioned this co-movement across different markets and across regions. That is obviously pose a big challenge about potential systematic risks.
Absolutely.
So I'm wondering, since you are concentrating on this subject, so I'm wondering if the role of the IMF has been, the task of the IMF has been restructured or something like that in facing this major change, since this kind of high co-movement, high degree of co-movement is quite new. And we just experienced the financial crisis in 2008, 2009. So that's my question.
That's obviously a professor. Your question is much tougher. And I can tell there are clearly evidence for the co-movements in the financial market in the past, particularly in the past 18 months. And it's not only the returns across assets, not only in the movements of the assets, different assets across the market. For example, the exchange rates can move up and down in the same ways, which even has much profound macro impacts as well. So this is a really challenging for the financial sector because it's very difficult to manage the risk. And so the market efficiency theory become ever weaker, right? The Farmer's theory 1963. Now that's a big, so that's whether the market exists efficiency is challenged. And this is really the fundamental issues. Now go back, but this is a theoretical issue, Chen Gang. It's also your job to study to solve this issue. But back to the fund, it's also very challenging because it's not all clear how fund are dealing with it, because this is very, very much market driven. Our job is to maintain the global financial stability. We recognize there's issues there. And, but whether there's a proper instruments to break those things down still is a new area. It's not all clear yet. I have to admit, I think it's not all clear yet. But you ask a very deep question. Yeah.
With the time constraint.
There's a big hand there in that corner.
This is the last question, yeah.
Yeah, last question, because I have to go to airport.
Yeah.
I hope it's a short question.
Very short.
Easy one.
Thank you for an interesting presentation and
not fascinating.
and fascinating as well. My question is, if we're seeing large increases in capital flows to emerging markets, does that mean that the IMF will be lending less money to these markets in the next 5 years?
No, it's a completely different things. The IMF only lend money when the countries in difficulties to dealing with financial and economic stabilities. So it's nothing to do with now capital flow can be part of that. If you have a lot of capital flow in, capital flow out, and if we make the country run into the current balance account balance sheets problems, so we can move in. But our money is not for investments. Okay, it's not FDI. It's not a portfolio. It's completely different monies. And although we give the money, but fundamentally, the IMF money is SDR. It's very just a piece of paper printed, never able to circulate in the market. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is fascinating. I was very much amazed by the questions the audience asked. It's wonderful. Thank you very much. Great honor.
Let's give a big hand to Dr. Zhu and Professor Tao. Would Dr. Zhu and Professor Tao please remain seated on stage? Now, may I invite Professor Eric Chen to come to the stage and deliver his closing remarks. Professor Chen, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Could I have the mic? Maybe I speak from here. Thank you very much, Dr. Zhu, for giving us not only a fascinating and interesting speech, but for me, it's wonderful and insightful. Now, as usual, I just take 1 or 2 minutes to say what I have learned from you, to thank you for the wonderful lecture. I think I've learned a lot about changing capital flows in our brave new world, or let's call it the brave new economy. The changing capital flow I learned from you, Dr. Zhu, is based on 2 fundamental elements of the new economy. One is the interconnectedness of the world economy. Interconnectedness is nothing new, but I learned something very new from you today. Interconnectedness is not based on geographical proximity. It's nothing to do with countries next to you, but built on economic advantage, complementarity, and economic relationship. And as a result, you have the advanced country cluster, you have the Asian cluster, which involves other emerging countries in other continents, and also oil-producing cluster. That's something very interesting, and as a result, we get faster and more cross-country capital flows. The second element I learned from you is the changing economic balance. As a result, you get emerging countries performing even better than advanced countries, reversing the trend in the older days. Not only in terms of economic performance, but emerging countries are doing better in terms of economic health and economic structure. So as a result, the direction of flow is very easy to analyze. It's the simple neoclassical model of money flowing from the lower return to the high return places. But at the same time, there is...
Summarize much better than I thought.
No. There's also...
You should give a lecture.
No. This is what I learned from you. But also I learned from you, Dr. Zhu, there's also a reverse flow.
I mean.
There's a reverse flow from emerging countries to advanced countries as well. From what I can read from your talk, because the financial development is much more mature in developing countries. So at the same time, you see the two-way flow of capital in this modern world. So I think this is a new phenomenon which we should observe. We should go on to monitor. And as senior official of IMF, Dr. Zhu, you certainly have given us a lot of food for thought for thinking of policies, macro, micro regulations and control with, I think your important word, the appropriate institutional support. With that, the world should be a brave new world. So thank you very much, Dr. Zhu, for your coming. And I have to turn to my students to thank my students for making it possible for wonderful and distinguished speakers like Dr. Zhu to come to speak to us. So thank you, students.